Hello, my name is Mordred Viking and I'd like to welcome you to this next section of the Starium XCV gameplay series. For this, we will be talking about the colonies and how exactly you interact with them. So over here we can see the Mordfjord home world of Kurieg, and on it we have 3 colonized areas. As you move through the game, you will be able to move colonist units to the different areas, drop them down, settle, and then you'll be building up your colonies from that. This is the starting position, so we start with 3 areas already colonized, one of them occupied by the Jervians. As you'll remember, this is the penal colony. One of them over here is another Jervian, and then the final one is colonized by Ursians, because the Jervians are the primary, and then the Ursians are the secondaries. As the game goes on, you will be able to move populations between the different areas, and you can have multiple different population types in one area. So we will, for example, see some of the Jervians migrating to the Ursian area and the Ursians into the 2 Jervians, and you'll get a lot more cross-blending of the different populations through that. The one I want to talk about first is this central one. You'll notice it's a lot more built up, and let's actually zoom in and take a look around. We can use the various toggles here at the bottom to change what we are looking at. So we can turn off the production buildings, for example. So we have mining, manufacturing, and then agriculture. We can turn off the strategic buildings. So we have a barracks, which is where you construct your units, and then also a shipyard, which is where you build your space vessels. And then also, if we just zoom in over to this one, the 3rd strategic building that you have access to is the space port, which is where you interact with the market, and you can buy and sell resources through that. The last toggle that we'll be looking at today is the population toggle, where we can see the tracks and then the houses. If we just turn off the production and strategic, we can see the population levels, the population infrastructure, which is the roads, the rails, and then also the housing, which has been developed in that area. If we zoom out, and then, whoops, a bit too far, into the next one over here, we can see that there are just a couple of houses, denoting a much lower population in that area. And then also over here, very similar. Going back to this, we can talk about how we actually interact with our population. So over here in the top left is where all of the production occurs. We can see that we have 60 population units at the moment, split into their primary task, the secondary task, and then the tertiary task. This means that in every single population area, your population is split into these 3 segments. So your population is always given a primary, secondary, and tertiary job. In this one at the moment, we are producing manufactured goods, that is the primary. The secondary are producing the infrastructure, which is why the symbol is slightly different for a new spaceport. And then the tertiary is building infrastructure for housing. And if we actually click on the button here, we can see the different options that we can give. So we could, for example, be producing science instead, and then the production of the colony changes appropriately. So science is broken down into the different insight types. Then on the next one we have organics. This is your food production. And then mining. This is the production of minerals. Manufacturing, where you convert organics and minerals into manufactured units, which you can then spend on the construction of units and spaceships. And then finally, the research, as we have already seen. We then have the infrastructure types. The infrastructure is basically determining the amount of population capacity that you can maintain in a certain job at any one time. So at the moment, we are upgrading the maintenance of the spaceport, or rather, we're building a spaceport so that we can do some off-world trade. We could change that to upgrading the barracks instead, and if we just go and switch back to the production, we can see that we have the little tower there corresponding to the barracks. Or we could upgrade the shipyard. We can see the crane here being the shipyard. We can also expand the infrastructure of the local population itself. So this would allow you to get more people in that area. So this is building more houses and more railroads and roads. Then expanding the infrastructure for organics. This will allow us to bring in more organic farmers, more miners, more industrialists, and then finally more scientists. So the big difference here is this is the actual production of resources, and then this is expanding your capacity for those resources. Alongside the production of these general resources, you can also produce trade goods. which is what the red toggle up here is. Every different area has their own trade goods. So for example, we have furniture in our main zone. In this one over here, we have different types of foods. And then over here, we have building materials. All of these trade goods are then consumed by a local population in the area and basically converted into exocredits. This process goes through the market, which we can see here. Now, I have to point out that this is still a system very much in active production, hence we have the to be determined here. So none of these numbers are final, we're still working on that. Every single area in the game produces one type of trade good. So for example, we have manufactured, crafted, bioconsumables, exotic metals, luxury, advanced electronics, and pharmaceuticals. All of your population units, regardless of what race they are, will require all of these resources. So if you have any shortages, then the price of those resources will go up. You will make some more money, but you may have actual shortages, so not all of your people get the consumption that they require. Alternatively, you may have a surplus of these. For example, if you actually produce that good in that area, these can then be put on the market and then sold to other empires. If you have a surplus, then your prices will sink. If you have a shortage, then your prices will rise. And this, of course, is the very basis of the supply and demand mechanics in economics. It is also possible to set up trade routes and things like that, but we are not quite ready to show that off. I just wanted to mention that to show that there is a full trade system in this game, which includes piracy, interdiction, all of that stuff. So I'm really quite excited about this. So the last thing I wanted to talk about here is how your populations actually interact with the terrain in which they live. So if we just zoom into the central province here, and then click over here on the portrait for the Jervians, we can see the Jervians have statistics, and these are modified depending on your terrain. So we can see that the Jervians have no modifiers for organics, metals, manufacturing, or research, but they do have a 90% bonus to trade good production and an 80% bonus to infrastructure production. We can also see any technology bonuses that they may have, as well as various modifiers for the production of ships, units, that type of thing. We can also click on the race overview to see the base stats of that race, so their aggressiveness, fortitude, physical, from which everything else is basically derived. If we just go over here to the Ursians, we can see how they compare to the Jervian counterparts. So their organics, metals, manufacturing, research, and trade goods are all the same, but they're actually slightly worse at producing infrastructure. Similarly, if we go to the race overview, we can see the different statistics that they have rather than the Jervians. Next up, we can click on the little terrain icon up here, which will give us the modifiers for that terrain. So we can see that rolling hills are not great for mining of metals, pretty bad at growth, so that's population growth, and then also quite slow to build infrastructure on. If we compare that to the main zone next door, which is jungle, we can see that jungle mining is really, really bad. Growth modifier is a little bit higher, and infrastructure construction is also a little bit quicker. Next up in this gameplay series, we will be talking about customization.